Record low water levels at Lake Mead, the country's largest reservoir, resulted in a grim discovery. Authorities say that a barrel with human remains was discovered Sunday afternoon. Investigators believe that the body belonged to a homicide victim from the 1980s. Police say that the barrel was likely dropped in a spot that was hundreds of yards offshore at the time, but because of plunging water levels, that area is now considered the shoreline.
Questions keep looming since park rangers at Lake Mead found human remains inside a barrel. The case has captured the interest across many in the valley and the country.
So how did it happen? And could there be more discoveries just like this? Fox 5's Drew Andre digs into the mystery in this Fox 5 special report.
Over 100 miles long and at its depths more than 1,000 feet deep, Lake Mead leaves decades of secrets below its surface.
Legit corpse in the barrel, just washed up.
And one of the most disturbing earlier this month.
You hear stories, but you never, you don't expect to see that on a day at the lake.
It was a Sunday afternoon not far from the launch ramp here at Hemingway Harbor. As the lake levels drop, a decaying barrel emerged out of the water. Inside it, human remains. One witness described to us still seeing the pants and a shirt on the person's body with a belt around their waist. But it's a discovery that never seemed possible before.
Had the water level not receded so far, we never make the discovery of this victim.
40 years ago, where this barrel sits was roughly 100 feet underwater and several hundred yards from shore. And investigators say they know exactly how the crime was committed.
Someone had to have a boat and someone had to, put someone in the barrel and push them off the boat.
The Clark County coroner determined the man died by gunshot wound, and his shoes lead detectives to believe the murder took place in the late 70s or early 80s. And that is where the mystery begins.
It was a time where the mob was on the front page almost every day. I think it has the signature of a mob hit.
Las Vegas Mob Museum historian Jeff Schumacher says stuffing a murder victim's body in a barrel was a common tactic in the mob across the country. And there are even reminders of that inside the museum, including maybe the most famous case, the death of a mobster, Johnny Roselli.
In 1976, he went missing. Later, he was found. A barrel was bobbing in the bay outside of Miami, and his body was inside it.
Metro Lieutenant Ray Spencer told me his team will investigate whether the murder could have ties to organized crime, if they're able to extract DNA from the remains.
If you notice, I'm saying if, because it will be a very challenging part of this investigation.
Right now, the bones are in the hands of the Clark County Coroner's Office.
Anytime you have remains that have been exposed to the elements, it makes it incredibly challenging to get an ID.
But a lab in Texas that specializes in advanced testing using genealogical data believes they have the resources to help.
I think we're extremely suited, and I think that we have proven before that we can work with such remains and be able to get an identification.
We've introduced you to Othram Labs before. With the funding of local philanthropist Justin Wu and his new nonprofit, the Vegas Justice League, Othram has helped Metro solve several cold cases, including Stephanie Isaacson's 1989 murder, which Othram says sets the world record for the smallest amount of perpetrator DNA recovered to make a match, just 0.12 nanograms.
That's the equivalent of about 15 human cells. If I touch my hand, I've left hundreds of cells, so that should tell you how little bit of DNA that was, and we were able to make a positive ID.
Kristen Middleman says they've solved multiple cases with remains found in bodies of water decades earlier. With the lowering lake levels, police believe that more bodies will be found. And less than 2 weeks after the body in the barrel discovery, north of Hemingway Harbor over at Colville Bay, another set of human remains was found. But police have determined there was no foul play involved in that death.
It's also possible that this isn't a mob case and that this person just kind of sort of a copycat on the mob motif, right? There are stories about serial killers who buried people in barrels. Barrels seem to figure very prominently in all kinds of different murders.
Authorities believe it will take months to potentially make an ID on the remains found in the barrel. But it's already sparked a new awareness for future discoveries. At Lake Mead, I'm Drew Andre, Fox 5 News, local Las Vegas.
The West is currently undergoing a historic drought, and the drought is so bad that Lake Mead in Nevada, near Las Vegas, has receded to the point where human remains are starting to be revealed. there was a barrel that had human remains in it. The authorities estimate that the individual in the barrel was murdered either in the mid 1970s to the early 1980s. They believe that's the case because of the items that were, in the barrel with him. They're items dating back to that era. And now we're learning that more human remains have been discovered because people who would get murdered ended up getting dumped into Lake Mead. But they were under the assumption that we would never discover the human remains, except now there's this historic climate-fueled drought. And the body of water has receded to the point where we're learning all sorts of things about crime that was committed in that area.
Yeah. So I've actually, because of COVID, we did a lot of trips where we drove, and I've gone now to both national parks and lakes, ranging from Arizona to Wyoming. Okay, we've been all over the West Coast, and everywhere we went, people would say the lakes are drying up. We have to do something. Like the park rangers, the tourists, even Republicans that see it with their own eyes, they're like, "Well, aren't we going to do anything? I mean, we're not going to have any water. Like Las Vegas might run out of water. Well, aren't we going to do anything?" And they're like, "Well, there's nothing you could do. It's climate change. It's going away." And so, yeah, of course, they're trying to do something. Sometimes they'll take a nearby lake that's not man-made and they'll try to use the water from there. There's like, they're going back to treaties from like the 1850s to try to find a way to get water. Guys, it's climate change. It's not coming later. It's right now. There's a mega drought in the West because of climate change. And yeah, we're gonna run out of water.
Mobs were a real thing. Like they really did throw dead bodies like in Lake Mead and they were never discovered. Like I know that there are all sorts of unsolved crimes. Like, we've heard all the stories, like cutesy little stories about police and how they protect and serve us and all of that. But there are a lot of violent crimes that go unsolved. We know that. And it's just incredible because now we see with our own eyes, thanks to the drought. I mean, it's just such a dystopian situation, right? How many crimes did end up going unsolved? How many families never found out what happened to their loved ones, right? And we're finding new bodies every week now over at Lake Mead. What a gift. Yeah. What a gift of climate change.
Yeah, that's so right about it. Like this is, if you saw this in a movie, you'd say, "Oh, come on, you're overdoing it." The climate change is so bad that it's heating up the planet and dead bodies are floating to the surface. Literally what's happening. Okay, I mean, we're living in a nightmare. And it goes to your point about the police, man. We have a huge complaint about how they abuse people way too much, right? But the other issue with police is they're incredibly lazy. You know how there's that all cops are bastards thing, ACAB? There's all cops are also lazy. Like, oh my God, I gotta find a body. I'm not gonna find a body. I gotta go grab some donuts, man.
Now, Colorado not alone in suffering from drought. A major reservoir along the Colorado River has hit a grim milestone. With water levels dipping so low, a water intake broke through the surface of Lake Mead. The Southern Nevada Water Authority releasing these photos at the lake behind the Hoover Dam. A new pumping facility has been activated to draw water from deeper in the reservoir. A deeper intake called the third straw allows Las Vegas to keep getting water even as the lake continues to empty. Several states relying on the Colorado River for water are taking steps to conserve.
Tonight, the dropping water levels are having a deadly impact on the ecosystem at Lake Mead. Hello, thanks for joining us for Live at 6. I'm Dave Crevassier.
And I'm Trisha Keene. Let's get right to anchor Paulina Butska, who's joining us live from Lake Mead and shows us what's going on with the water levels out there. Paulina.
Hey Trisha, hey Dave. So I'm at Boulder Harbor and I wish there was some water to show you guys, but in just 1 week, all of the water has dried up. Take a look. Alan Love was at this very spot.
We couldn't walk out this for a week ago. There was still water here. And
a week ago?
Yeah, and that's where you saw the fish swimming around, was right in there, right around in there.
His new discovery, a fish graveyard.
There's lots of white fish, as you'll see in the videos. There's lots of white fish all around. The birds have taken care of all that. There's not even
I mean, there's just...
Oh, yeah, there's one right there. Yeah. Wow.
For years, we have been telling you about the drought conditions here at Lake Mead and what it could do to our water supply. Now below me, we can visibly show you a fish gravesite, some parts still visibly soft from where water used to be.
As those backwaters, if you will, start to dry up, then oxygen becomes low, then the chances are you're going to see some fish die out there.
Nevada Department of Wildlife Supervisor Doug Nielsen says Lake Mead is undergoing changes that are not just impacting people, but wildlife as well.
Sooner or later, the fish populations are going to have to adjust to the habitat that's available. That all your questions all come back to the same answer. It's all habitat, habitat, habitat. So there has to be enough components in that to provide them what they need.
Conditions that are sobering to see just how dry it can get.
This is the welcome to the desert thing. If you don't have any water, you can dry out just like this.
Yeah,
I mean, it doesn't happen, over time. It happens really fast.
Now, Doug Nielsen, who you did see in my story, says that the fish hatchery here at Lake Mead is still set to open and release more fish into Lake Mead. Reporting live, I'm Paulina Butska. Back to you guys in the studio.
Now to a gruesome discovery over at Lake Mead. Human remains were discovered there over the weekend.
Yeah, let's bring in Kirika Izuka live for us at Lake Mead this morning with what she's learned so far. Kirika?
Yeah. Hey, good morning, Dave. Good morning, Faven. So, of course, this is an ongoing investigation, so we don't have a lot of information at this time, but this is what we know so far. So we know around 3 p.m. yesterday here at Hemingway Harbor, a woman and her family were out here. The woman started screaming because she saw a barrel with what looked like human remains inside. Now, the area was taped off and Metro was there to help to recover those remains. And the Lake Public Affairs Department did confirm later that they were human remains in the barrel. And the Clark County Medical Examiner has been contacted to find the cause of death. So like I said, this happened around 3 p.m. yesterday. There was a barrel that had washed up on the shore and the woman saw what looked like skeletal remains inside. And the Lake Public Affairs Department did confirm that it was human remains. So this, again, like I said, this is an investigation that's ongoing. And of course, we will update you with the latest on air and online as we.
On this side of the pond in Nevada, a grim discovery, a body found on the shore of Lake Mead, just outside of Las Vegas. Boaters found a man's body over the weekend inside this corroded barrel. Authorities have determined he was murdered sometime between 40 and 50 years ago. And the ongoing severe drought in that area is leading to even more discoveries in the water. While on that scene, one of News Nation's investigative teams discovered a second barrel near the site of the first, reported it to police, and police say that second barrel, thankfully, was empty. But David Charn joins us live now. So, David, you actually discovered that second barrel. What were you doing when you found it?
Yeah, Nicole, sort of an odd and eerie story. So we were out there doing the story on the first barrel that was found over the weekend. That barrel had already been taken to the coroner's office here so they could try to identify the remains inside of it. So we were on the beach there. We saw where it was. There was some debris left over. It was pretty obvious where it was. And then my photographer says, okay, well, there's another barrel several hundred yards just down the way there, down the shore. So he's getting video. You know how it is. The reporters are sort of waiting around as the photographers are doing their thing. I go over and there's this 55-gallon drum barrel stuck in the mud just down the way from the other barrel. And it was sort of odd. There was a little hole in it, so we were able to take a flashlight, look in. We didn't see anything. We're sort of worried we might see something a little gruesome looking back at us, but we informed police. I informed my sources at the police department. They did check it out. And as you mentioned, that barrel was in fact empty, but certainly odd because these barrels seem to just be popping up in our lake here.
Yeah, pretty scary, pretty disturbing there, David. What was your reaction, when your photographer spotted it? And then what did police say when you reported that to them?
Yeah, well, I wish my photographer had gotten my reaction on camera because I was pretty jumpy around there trying to look at this. And the police sort of laughed it off a bit, but they did go and they checked it out. They did open it up. and there was nothing in it. We were concerned because the barrels, they've been stuck in the mud, so you can only really see down to a certain level. And these are like 55-gallon drum oil barrels. And they're full of water because they're up to the water level. So we didn't really know. I was happy to hear that there was no one in it when police told us that.
Well, so David, what's next in this investigation? We know that, there was this body discovered, believed to have been murdered, 40 to 50 years ago. What's next in that investigation?
Right. So police need to figure out who this person is, and that's going to take some time. Right now, they're trying to figure out if there's any sort of DNA evidence that they can pull from this, basically what was skeletal remains with some clothing. But the detectives tell me that they suspect that more bodies are going to pop up in the next decades, maybe years, because our lake is receding. This area where these barrels are being found was a half-mile out into the lake when this barrel would have been dropped in the 70s or 80s. So that just gives you an idea. And as we've reported here locally in Las Vegas, and I'm sure you've heard around the country, there are a lot of stories about some misdeeds here in the Las Vegas area from a prior time involving a prior group of people that were dumping bodies, particularly with cement blocks and cement barrels, in the lake. And as the lake recedes, they might be popping up. Nicole?
Yeah, we'll certainly see what else is discovered. David Charnes, thank you for that. Thank you for watching.
Thanks for joining us at 4. I'm Kirsten Joyce.
And I'm Christian Cazares. Right now, Metro Police are working dozens of tips to figure out who was found inside the barrel at Lake Mead. Now, this is a story being shared around the world, first reported right here by our 8 News Now I-team. Metro Police telling us they've received several dozen tips as they work to identify the man. Now, he's believed to have been shot and killed in the late 70s, possibly early 80s. Now, you can submit a tip by calling Metro or through Crime Stoppers. Well, the case is being investigated as a homicide, though the circumstances of the crime are unknown. Some are speculating that this could be mob-related.
Joe Moeller spoke to an executive director at the Mob Museum who says he's keeping a close eye on this. Joe joins us live at the museum with what was shared. Joe.
Well, just like all of us, the one historian here at the Mob Museum has a lot of questions about this case. He says it is very possible this could be a mob-related death.
Killing somebody and putting them in a barrel and dumping them in water is actually a common mob tactic going back to the 1800s. This was something that was very, almost common if you look at it over a long period of time.
While we don't know if the death is mob-related, many can't help but wonder if it is. A body found in a barrel. Police believe the victim inside was shot in the 70s or 80s. Historian Jeff Schumacher is the vice president of exhibits and programs at the Mob Museum. He says bodies of many mobsters were killed in the same way throughout history.
It may not be a mob hit. It may be somebody who sort of copied the tactics of the mob. But when we're talking about the era, 1970s, 1980s, the mob was pretty prominent in Las Vegas at that time. And, it was a time of a lot of conflict as well. So there were people who went missing.
He says regardless of who committed the crime, the circumstances around this case could provide answers for a decades-old mystery.
Now, he also spoke to a detective from that time as well. He says this discovery does not come as a surprise. Schumacher says they will be keeping a close eye on this case to see if here at the Mob Museum they can help at all. I'm reporting live in downtown Las Vegas. Joe Moeller, live, Local Now.